All right, let's just jump right in. Have you ever felt like all this pressure to be positive all the time is, I don't know, actually making you feel worse? If so, you're in the right place. We are diving into Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And this book basically flips the entire self help industry on its head. It argues that a good life doesn't come from getting rid of your problems, but from finding better problems to solve. And it all kicks off with a pretty unlikely hero.
So, meet Charles Bukowski. By pretty much every standard, the guy was a loser. He was an alcoholic, a womanizer, a gambler. His writing got rejected for decades. He had this soul-crushing job at a post office, drank himself to sleep most nights, and just hammered out poetry on a beat-up typewriter. But then, at 50 years old, he finally gets his shot and becomes this huge success. Now, the typical story would say, see, he never gave up. But Bukowski's own gravestone says, don't try. The point wasn't about perseverance. The point was, he knew he was a loser, he totally accepted it, and he wrote about his failures with brutal, unflinching honesty. He actually succeeded because he wasn't trying to be something he wasn't.
And Bukowski's story really shines a light on the first huge problem Manson talks about, what he calls the positivity trap. You know, our whole culture is just obsessed with being happier, healthier, smarter, richer, better than everyone else. But this constant, relentless focus on the positive, ironically, it starts to have a really, really negative effect on us.
And this gets to a really core paradox of how our minds work. The more you desperately want a positive experience, like to be happier or wealthier or more loved, the more you just end up reminding yourself over and over again of what you don't have. I mean, think about it. A genuinely happy person doesn't need to stand in front of a mirror and tell themselves, I'm happy. They just are. But when you accept that, hey, negative experiences are just a normal, unavoidable part of life, you free yourself from that desperate need to run from them. And that feeling of freedom, well, that's a positive experience right there.
Yeah, and this constant chase for positivity fuels something Manson calls the feedback loop from hell. Sound familiar? It's when you feel anxious about something, and then you start getting anxious about the fact that you're anxious. Or you get angry, and then you get angry at yourself for getting angry. It's this vicious cycle where our own brain just turns on itself. And of course, this is cranked up to 1,000 by social media, where it looks like everyone else is living this perfect, amazing life, which just feeds our own loop and makes us feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with us for ever feeling bad. So, how in the world do you break out of that loop? Well, this is where Manson introduces his big idea. The subtle art of not giving a fuck is not about being indifferent to everything. That would just make you a psychopath. No, it's about a radical, conscious reprioritization of what you choose to care about.
And there's a world of difference here, right? On one side, you've got pure indifference, caring about nothing, avoiding all your problems. That's not the goal. On the other side is Manson's idea, carefully choosing where you invest your limited mental and emotional energy. It's about saving your fucks, so to speak, for what truly matters. Your family, your core values, your real goals. It means being okay with being different, it means you might tick some people off, and it means staring failure right in the face for something you truly believe in. It's about deciding what's important and just saying screw it to everything else. Now, the polar opposite of this mindset is entitlement. You know, the self-esteem movement of the last few decades basically taught a whole generation that every single person is special and deserves to feel amazing no matter what. And the result? It created a lot of people who believe they're owed happiness without actually earning it. This sense of entitlement traps us in this little bubble where everything is about us, and it makes us totally incapable of dealing with real problems because every challenge feels like some huge personal injustice. The only way out? You have to accept your own averageness. The obsession with being exceptional, that's the real problem.
Okay, so if we're supposed to accept that life isn't always some exceptional, amazing highlight reel, then what does that even mean for happiness? Well, if problems and suffering are just a part of the deal, if they're inevitable, then the secret to a good life isn't avoiding them. It's about choosing which problems you actually want to have. Manson even invents this character, Disappointment Panda, who's basically a superhero that shows up to tell us the harsh truths we need to hear. And his number one truth is this: suffering is actually biologically useful. Pain is nature's most effective way to get us to change. Think about it. The person who is just a little bit dissatisfied, a little bit insecure, is the one who's going to innovate and survive. Your pain isn't a bug. It's a feature. It's designed to push you to do something. So here's how this actually works. Life is never, ever about getting rid of problems. When you solve one problem, say you finally get that gym membership, you just create new ones, like having to wake up early or dealing with sore muscles. The thing is, problems just get upgraded. A person on the street has money problems, and Warren Buffett has money problems. Warren Buffett just has better money problems. So happiness isn't some destination you arrive at. It's an action. It's the actual process of finding and solving the problems you genuinely enjoy tackling.
And the metrics we use to measure our own lives completely define our reality. Let's take two musicians. Dave Mustaine gets kicked out of Metallica. He goes on to form Megadeth and sells 25 million albums. That's a massive success, right? But he spent his life measuring himself against Metallica, so he always felt like a failure. On the other hand, you have Pete Best, who got kicked out of the Beatles. Instead of chasing their level of fame, he changed his values. He found true happiness in a stable marriage and a family he loved. Things he decided were more important. Same exact situation, totally different values, and completely different life outcomes. So this brings us to what might be the most important question in the whole book. Everybody wants the reward. Everyone wants the amazing results, the victory lap. But who you are, that's defined by the struggle you're willing to put up with. The path to the top of the mountain is what really matters, not just daydreaming about the view. The joy is in the climb itself. So what struggle are you choosing for your life? All right, so we've picked our struggles. What's next? Well, the next step is a big one, taking complete and total ownership of them. This is where we shift from the philosophy of it all to how you can directly apply this to your life right now. This is honestly one of the most powerful ideas in the entire book. We tend to mix up fault and responsibility. See, fault is past tense. If someone rear-ends your car, it's their fault. But responsibility is present tense. It's your choice right now how you react. Do you scream and yell? Do you call the cops? Do you just exchange insurance info? You might not be at fault for the problems in your life, but you are always responsible for how you respond to them, and that is where all your power lies. Just look at the story of William James. I mean, this guy was a failure in every sense of the word. He was plagued by illness, professional failure, deep depression. He was on the verge of taking his own life. And then he made a bet with himself. For 1 year, he would act as if he were 100% responsible for everything that happened in his life. And that one simple shift in mindset completely transformed him. He became the father of American psychology. Taking responsibility, even for things that are not your fault, is the very first step towards solving them. But what if you don't feel motivated? We usually think it works like this. You need inspiration, which then gives you motivation, which finally leads to action. Manson says that's completely backward. He argues for the do something principle. Just take a small action, any action at all. That little action then creates a reaction, which sparks some inspiration, which in turn fuels your motivation to keep going. The key is, don't sit around waiting for motivation to strike you like lightning. Action is the spark. So, everything we've talked about builds to this one final, really powerful perspective. Because to truly understand what's worth giving a fuck about, Manson says we have to confront the one and only certainty we all share, our own death. Just think about the absolutely incredible story of Hiro Onoda. For almost 30 years after World War II ended, he kept fighting in the Philippine jungle because he was convinced the war was still on. The amount of suffering he endured was immense, but it was bearable because it had a purpose, loyalty to his country, to his emperor. But when he finally returned to a modern, consumerist Japan, that purpose completely vanished. His 30 years of struggle became meaningless overnight, and that realization crushed him way more than any physical pain ever did. It just goes to show, if suffering is a given, the most important question we can ask is, why am I suffering? For what purpose? The philosopher Ernest Becker actually had a name for this search for purpose. He called them our immortality projects. He argued that deep down, our fundamental fear of death is what drives us to create a conceptual self, a legacy, an idea of ourselves that will outlive our physical bodies. Our values, our work, our kids, our relationships, they are all, in a way, attempts to give our short lives a meaning that goes beyond death. And really, this is what it all comes down to. Since death is the only thing in life we can know for sure, it has to be our compass. It's the North Star that we use to orient everything else. When we get comfortable with the idea of our own death, we're suddenly freed from chasing all the trivial, meaningless stuff. It lets us ask what really matters, filtering out all the noise and focusing on a life that has genuine meaning. So I'll just leave you with this thought. Confronting our own mortality isn't supposed to be morbid. It's actually liberating. It clarifies what we value and forces us to be honest about the kind of life we're actually living. You are going to die. Knowing that, what will you choose to care about? What is the legacy you're going to leave behind? And ultimately, what truly deserves your fucks?